So, James Leininger is a real boy. I'm a real boy. His past life's name, which has been confirmed not only by little James himself, but also researching what little James would say. And his past life's name is James Hutson, who was a World War II pilot killed in action.
On March 3rd, 1945, a 21-year-old Navy fighter pilot on a mission over the Pacific was shot down by Japanese artillery.
Hi, I'm Liv.
And I'm also Liv.
Inception. Today we're talking about reincarnation. I'm gonna lose my freaking mind.
You forgot something.
What?
And we're your Meta Psyckicks.
And we're your Meta Psyckicks! No, I'm gonna lose my mind. No, it's too perfect. I literally was getting spanked today. What are we looking at?
There's a giant bee outside the window.
As long as it's outside the window.
Hi, I'm Em.
And I'm Liv, and we're your Meta Psyckicks. Today we're talking about reincarnation, and I'm super stoked because this goes not only into just reincarnation stories itself, but into like my own weird stuff. So, did I say we're your Meta Psyckicks?
Yeah,
dude.
Twice.
Mercury's been in Gatorade, and I've been losing.
It's not in Gatorade anymore. Saturn's in Gatorade now.
It has. What does Saturn do?
Something about karma.
But I want to talk about today the story of James Leininger.
His name might well have been forgotten, were it not for the remarkable, some might say unbelievable story of a little boy named James.
So this guy, Dr. Jim Tucker, who literally has just completely given his life to studying reincarnation cases, wrote a paper about James Leininger, who is a little boy with super awesome, cool, accurate reincarnation facts of who he was before he was James Leininger now.
What does this James boy look like?
The one that's alive or the one that's passed?
The one about reincarnation stories. That has the reincarnation stories.
Okay, because James Leininger is the little boy who I'm going to talk about with a reincarnation story.
Is he alive?
Yes.
Interesting.
He's like a little bit younger than us, I think. Or at least the same age as us. Something like that. He's very close to our own age right now. Because this was documented in like 2000.
Got you.
Is when he was like 2 or 3.
Okay, there's a man here.
Mm.
He's in his 30s. He might be this man's past life. I don't know. I don't know what he looks like.
Well, if you get any descriptions, shout him out to the kids that are watching.
Well, I don't know if this is who we're talking about, but he has like my color hair and he's tall, skinny, and it's like a little bit curly hair.
I don't know about the curly.
It's like kind of, it's like fluffy.
Might be fluffy.
Yeah.
Anyways, you'll get it. So anyways, I literally wrote, ooh girl, get him. Because this guy, Jim Tucker, wrote a paper about James Leininger, who's the little boy currently living, that when he was between the ages of 2 and 4, started talking about his past life as another person. And this guy, I don't even know what his first name is, but his Michael Saduff. Michael Saduff literally was like, this guy, he's the skeptic. Michael Saduff is the skeptic. And he decided to put his hat in the ring and write a refuting paper based on what Jim Tucker had already wrote. And then Jim Tucker responded by writing another scientific paper that was published in the Journal of Scientific Exploration, Anomalies in Frontier Science as a response. I'm sorry, but I love it. You literally write a scientific paper and then someone's like, you know what? I just gotta rain on your parade because I don't think any of this is real and this is why. Here. And then he's like, actually, sir, sit in your lane because I'm gonna republish this. I love it. It's great. So, James Leininger is a real boy. I'm a real boy. His past life's name, which has been confirmed not only by little James himself, but also researching what little James would say. And his past life's name is James Hutson, who was a World War II pilot killed in action.
On March 3rd, 1945, a 21-year-old Navy fighter pilot on a mission over the Pacific was shot down by Japanese artillery.
So James Leininger, I'll call him Little James, he has 8 B cases. So these are all things that little James had said before it was confirmed who, or that the James he claimed to be was actually identified as a past living human being. So, and B cases, remember, are like the hard-hitting facts, the non-infiltrated, no type of bias.
Oh.
So, number 1, little James signed all of his drawings James 3. He continued to sign his Crayola creations past the age of 3. So, it wasn't just like a one-time thing. He did it for more than 1 year. And James and his parental alibis, that's what I said, his parents. I think his parents' names are Bruce and Andrea. But anyways, they state that the youngster's reasonings is because, quote, he was the third James.
One day I asked him why he's calling himself James 3. Well, it's because I'm the third James. And every once in a while you ask him that today and he'll still say the same thing.
Which is weird.
The third James of what? In his family?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
In his past life, James Hutson was a junior, making the current life of James Leininger the third James.
Okay.
So his past life, James Hutson, was James Hutson Jr., making James Leininger now James the third. Are you freaking kidding me? Anyways, so this is when I thought I started talking to James Hutson, so the past life. For whatever reason, I was asking questions to myself, and this guy, James Hutson, popped in. And he said, if I'm going to reincarnate, may as well make it easy for everybody, myself included.
By making his name James.
Yes. Well, no, because if you're going to be walking around this life, you may as well have the same name, make it easier for everybody, instead of shouting out a different name. You're like, my name's Tommy! No, my name was always James, because I was James the last time. It's like, it makes it easy. Oh, it's cute. He had me write, turning into a fine young lad. People didn't peg or mark me as a smart fellow, but I read them books. He like has this like accent a little bit too, and I was confused. I was like, it's almost like a southern accent, but it's not. It's more like a Midwestern Appalachian kind of accent, if that makes any sense. Because a lot of people don't associate the Midwest with having like a southern accent, but some people in the Midwest do have what we equate to as like a southern accent, but it's not. So when I asked James Hutson in spirit, I said, why would you keep the name? You can't just make sex jokes. It's funny, but it's not like an answer. And he said, I did it to honor my pops. Once I made the decision to incarnate, because he prefers the term incarnate, he said my pops was still living. Though it'd be nice for him to know something special after he was gone, with all the knowing. He's referencing that souls know, see, hear, and feel everything. However, now I'm confused about the idea of him being a soul and a new soul, because wouldn't those be separate, right? I know separation is an illusion, but like, I don't understand. I said, so if you're talking to me now, however, you're the reincarnation, or James Leininger is the reincarnation of yourself, how is that he's like saying things about you? It's weird. It was confusing me. And I said, you're separate, right? And he said, yes. And I said, well, he's talking about keeping the name James in his current life to honor his father, since it was important enough with his father to be a James Jr. in his past life, that he wanted to do it in this life too, because he died so young.
Okay.
So I said, well, if you're in heaven, then wouldn't it be like after your dad passed, because eventually he would have to die, he would know that you're in heaven and you guys would be able to like meet up and talk, and you wouldn't have to have another reincarnation in the namesake? Like, why are you trying to make it separate? And I said, it's separate, right? And he says, yes. And I said, okay, well then you'd still be able to see your father in heaven, right? And he put yes in, correct, except it's more complicated than that. So I was like, okay, I don't understand what that means. Okay, so number 2, little James told his parents the name of the ship he flew off was named Natoma. And after being fact-checked, there is the USS Natoma Bay, which was later identified by James's father, Bruce.
Finally, a breakthrough. He learned that there was just one pilot from the squadron killed at Iwo Jima. That pilot, James M. Houston Jr. Is this why little James was calling himself James 3?
The ship was an escort carrier stationed in the Pacific during World War II. And little James was 28 months old when he remembered this.
How did he die?
We're gonna get there. Why, do you want to say something?
No.
Okay.
I've just started getting weird things about people dying, so I don't want to say anything now.
So, CORT B number 3. So he flew a Corsair. If you don't know, a Corsair is a type of plane. So, little James said he flew a Corsair. Parents thought that little James said he was flying it when he died, but in reality, that didn't happen, and it wasn't that he said he died flying a Corsair. What little James actually said was that he was flying a Corsair when he crashed. So his parents just associated the Corsair and it being crashed with him dying. But he never actually said, I died flying a Corsair. So James Hutson, the past life, it was later identified that he indeed flew a Corsair as he was part of a squadron that tested them for the Navy when they were first developed. And it's interesting because I was asking questions, and this is what I wrote that Hutson said in Spirit. You gotta know those machines. These contraptions were spick and span, but had a slew of issues. Putting me and the boys in them just wasn't right. Sure, they was fun enough, but not enough for them issues. A man's ought to remember such a thing in a time.
And he got to the Corsair and he said, that's a Corsair. And he goes, you know what? They used to get flat tires all the time.
In fact, historians and pilots agree that the plane's tires took a lot of punishment on landing.
I was asking him, I think, like, why would you have a little boy remember that he crashed? Like, that's weird. Because now I'm thinking that...
Is he controlling that?
Well, that's what I was thinking. And what he told me was that it's not that he's controlling it, it's that the soul remembers.
Yeah. Because I remember really traumatic things from my past life.
Yeah, but you don't know why. Well, I was just thinking that maybe it was the past life telling the little boy, and he's like, no, your soul remembers. Well, it's like an imprint.
Is easier to carry over, which is why you have birthmarks where you had the most trauma.
It's weird. Now, number 4 is that he was shot down by the Japanese. So, James Hutson, the past life, was indisputably shot down by the Japanese, according to Jim Tucker. But I guess Sadat stated in his argumentative paper aimed at what Dr. Tucker is talking about, he says that a pilot whose plane was shot down and crashed in the water, that's highly general claim, and it's unsurprisingly correct. So basically the skeptic is saying, well, he said he was shot down by the Japanese. That, like, it was World War II. It doesn't matter that he said that he was shot down by Japanese. That's not proof at all, because most people that were in World War II that were in planes over the Pacific got shot down and killed by the Japanese. Well, Dr. Tucker parlays with the statement of, quote, in reality, a little less than half of the airplane losses during combat missions in the Pacific ocean areas during World War II were due to enemy fire. And that is from an Office of Statistical Control in 1945. So less than half of the planes that were lost and people were shot down was due to enemy fire. Thousands of pilots were killed in training accidents before they even went overseas. So a claim of being shot down by the Japanese is more specific than the skeptic might actually want to say. So now we're on to number 6. Number 6 gets split into 3 actual B cases because the statement has sections that you can take from it. So, little James was quoted saying, my airplane got shot in the engine and it crashed in the water and that's how I died.
And one day, while leafing through a new book about the Battle of Iwo Jima, Bruce turned to an aerial photo of the Pacific Island. James was seated nearby.
He pointed to it and he goes, Daddy, that's where my airplane was shot down.
So this statement was reported by his mother, Andrea, and it contains 3 CORT B items. So first is my airplane got shot in the engine. Second is my airplane crashed into the water. And the third is that's how I died. His father, Bruce, posted on a Chichijima website and heard from a crew member of the Sergeant Bay and eventually got the opportunity to speak with 4 World War II veterans. This was too perfectly written, so I just want to quote Dr. Tucker directly. He put, this was not a case of Bruce's questions stirring up vague memories. One of the veterans, Chuck Jack Durham had written an informal war memoir years before Bruce talked to him. In it, he wrote about Hutson. Quote, one of the fighter pilots from the squadron assigned to give us cover was hit with a direct hit on the nose, and all I could see were pieces falling into the bay.
Little James would describe being shot down. He told of how his plane had sustained a direct hit on the engine.
We had an airplane, and I said, well, can you show me where it was? And he pointed right up to the front of the engine.
Another one from John Richardson, he began sobbing as he told Bruce about that day that James Hutson died. He said, he talked about seeing Hutson plane and said, quote, we were no more than 30 yards apart when the pilot deliberately turned his head and looked at me. I caught his eyes and we connected with each other. No sooner we had connected that his plane was hit in the engine by what seemed to be a fairly large shell. He added, I have lived with the pilot's face as the eyes fixed on me every day since it happened. I never knew who he was. I was the last guy to see him alive.
Do you know what side he was on?
You know, I think he was on the right-hand side, because when I read that, I see myself as, or I see James Hutson from the perception of John Richardson. I see myself in a plane and I look to my right and I see James Hutson.
James Hutson is on the right of this guy.
I think so. At least that's how
what I see too.
I perceive it. It's weird. Yeah, I see myself as James Richardson in the plane and I look over to my right and I see someone get bombed in the nose of the plane and I go down.
Yeah, and then I can hear the plane, like, I don't know, being in a plane is super weird because I didn't realize that it sounded like that when you're in one of those weird planes.
It's really loud.
He can't hear very well.
Mm-hmm. It's almost like you feel the stuff that's going on outside of you because everything inside the cockpit is so loud.
Oh, there's something that happened to his head all the way down to his neck.
Who?
I don't know.
James Richardson, John Richardson, or James Hutson?
James. I'm not talking to this other guy.
Yeah. He crashed flying a Corsair because all of the military people had problems with trials and things like that.
Oh.
So on that squadron, yes, he crashed.
So he was in a different plane.
Correct.
And he got shot down, which was different than crashing.
In active war.
Got it.
So when he was flying a Corsair in the test squadron...
you just said he didn't die from crashing.
Yeah, no, he didn't die from the testing squadron of Corsairs. He died when he was in active military duty, flying off of the Natoma Bay carrier ship in an FM2.
Yeah.
And he died...
He hit his head.
Well,
or something happened this on his right-hand side.
Probably. I mean, I think he got hit from the left, and if he got hit from the left engine portion of his plane, if you get hit from the left, you're going to hit your head on the right-hand side. So,
got you.
Anyways, number 7 is that he has nightmares of the plane crashing and sinking in the water.
I'd wake him up and he'd be screaming and he'd always be laying on his back, kicking his feet up at the ceiling. And I'd say, baby, what were you dreaming about? He'd say, airplane crash on fire, little man can't get out.
So his father Bruce describes how James had nightmares of his plane crashing on fire and sinking, and that he used to scream about it in nightmares, about him being unable to get out. So I wrote, nightmares are not cool. Why? And again, like you said, he said a soul remembers a thing like that. And claircognizantly, James Hutson explains it like PTSD or an involuntary physical trigger. And then my spirit guide stepped in and were like, the dream realm is the closest to the spirit realm. So it's the semi-permeable, like, energetic membrane, and it's the science between past life nightmares. Because, like, if you're in a nightmare, you're going to be closest to your soul. And if you're that child and your soul is still that close to your past life, you're going to have those dreams.
You're also more open to information when you're asleep.
It's crazy to me. Absolutely crazy.
I don't know. I have flashbacks awake, but I'm also a psychic medium, so I don't know.
Yeah.
If it counts, but...
So it was noted that little James would scream in his nightmares that his plane crashed, was on fire, and that he couldn't get out. And in real life, the eyewitnesses of the World War II veterans testified that Hudson's plane crashed in the water, exploded, and burned quickly, sinking. I'm sorry, but that's crazy. So anyways, I'm just going against everything and telling you what Sadath said because it just makes me angry. So he challenges this information, arguing that it is inconsistent with Hudson's death as described in the aircraft action report. stating that the AAR indicates that the impact of the crash killed Hutson. And I literally wrote in all capitals, wrong, because Dr. Tucker comes in like a freaking, just like, I don't know, I just love it. It's awesome. So Dr. Tucker comes in and he says, quote, the AAR said Hutson's plane went, quote, crashing into the water, exploding and burning, end quote. And that, quote, it is believed that it would have been impossible to survive the crash and resulting explosion, end quote. So Dr. Tucker says not only is the report only surmising what happened, but dying in an exploding, burning plane is clearly not the same as being, quote, killed on impact. So literally the veterans were like, I saw him get shot down in the engine.
I saw the hit. I would say he was hit head on. Yeah, right on the middle of the engine.
Just as little James had described it.
He went into the water and then sank.
Mm-hmm. And then the conscious for the whole thing.
Yeah.
Well, kind of conscious.
Well, I mean, if he has a nightmare of, if James Leininger, little James, had a nightmare of saying, like, I can't get out, that means that he died of drowning, not of actual injuries. He was conscious before he died.
Got you.
Yeah. Anyways. So, number 8. Quote, Jack Larson was there. So, to better understand the child and the interesting situation, LJ's parents asked him who else was present when he was killed in his past life. And little James replied, Jack Larson.
So I said, do you remember any friends or anyone else that you flew with? And he said, Jack Larson.
So at this time, little James was just under 2.5 years old when he gave the name Jack Larson. During the attack, it was discovered through past AAR records that Jack Larson was indeed a member of the Natoma ship.
And Jack Larson, the Navy buddy little James recalled? Well, it turns out there was a pilot named Jack Larson who served aboard the Natoma Bay.
And in the record, it shows that Jack Larson's plane was positioned right next to Hudson's on the day he was killed. So in an AAR diagram of, and it's interesting because I don't really know what the AAR diagram is, so I was asking Jack Hutson what it was since he's here the whole time. And he's like, before you go out on a mission, you guys have to know where you're gonna be within like position. So like think of it like birds when they're in their formation. He's like, we would write out what plane is where in what formation and how we're supposed to deal with whatever enemy we're going to fight. So you need to know where you are in relation to everybody else, because if you see your friend go down, you need to know, all right, I'm gonna report yada yada just went down on the right hand side, and now everyone that's in that squadron knows where they have a line of fire that is open now because it's not being covered. So that's literally where Jack Larson was. It absolutely blows my mind. I can't deal with it. That is a total of 10 B items, including the breakdown of number 6, statements made before the previous personality of James Hutson that was identified for James Leininger, with supporting accurate details later verified. And I just want to like lose my mind because it's so freaking cool. Also, I think I talked to the soul of James Hutson, which is crazy. If you guys want to look it up, his real name or his full name was James McCready Hutson Jr. And I looked this up just for my own validation, honestly. So this is what he looked like.
Mm-hmm. That's the man I'm talking to. It's weird.
It's so weird. And I wanted to know, because he was talking in an accent, kind of like a southern accent, but I was like, you don't feel like you're from the South? And he's like, no, but I have an accent. And I was like, okay, so it's like Appalachian accent, right? And he's like, kind of. Well, he didn't answer. That's why I looked up what his name was, because I was like, where was he born? I need to know the accent. And it says that James McCready Hutson Jr. was from Montgomery County, Pennsylvania. And if you go to Pennsylvania,
people talk weird.
Yep. And his birthplace was actually in Indiana. And if you go to Indiana,
do people also talk weird?
Yes.
So, if you have any weird things that you think might be passed on to you from a past life, please let us know in the comments. Like, do you have weird, unexplained phobias? Or do you really feel drawn to weird locations that you have no association with? Let us know in the comments.
Weird birthmarks?
Yeah, you have weird birthmarks. Or do you have flashbacks of your past lives? Let us know in the comments. We would love to hear it. Also,
we'll put it in a reincarnation listener story episode.
Also, if you want to submit your story for a future listener story, make sure to go to the link in the description and submit your story for a chance to get featured. If you guys want more content like this, make sure to subscribe, hit that notification bell, and we'll see you guys in the next one.
You want me to say it again?
Yeah.
We're Meta Psyckicks!
These are our lovely patrons.
You could become a patron too and talk about reincarnation stories with us on Discord. So like the fact that of all the reincarnation stories, this is the one that I'm covering because I personally feel that I had a past life that was alive during World War I, if not also World War II, is like why I feel so strongly about that, because I have no explanation for why I have such a like specific viewpoint on glorifying, like I say, war like that.
Mm-hmm.